When you're a grizzled veteran, building out champions can be as second nature as walking, breathing, and chewing gum. But when you're a brand new player, is it that easy? There is a daunting amount of information you need to know when building out champions and a fear that you're going to do it wrong. So today, we're going to talk about how to build out your first champion. All right, time to build out your first champion. How do we build it out? Where do we focus? Where are we trying to build them? Where are we trying to level them up? And how do we focus on their gear, their masteries, their stats? Let's talk about that today. The first thing I want to talk about is the starter champions. Each starter champion has a slightly different need and want, and so that is something you should be mindful. If you've picked Elhain like I have, you're not going to need accuracy. So all you're going to want to do is build out artifacts that increase her attack, her crit damage, that get her crit rate to 100%, and any bonus into speed. You're also going to want some survivability to make sure she can live, because the old adage is 0 damage from a dead champion. Alright, if you're talking about any of the other 3 champions, and we'll go to Dark Kale as the de facto, not Dark Kale, regular Kale as the standard. In the case of Kale, he does need accuracy, so you're going to need that accuracy stat in order for him to land these poisons, and even the poisons here. I hate the fact that this Kale will be by far and large the best champion in the game if he didn't have these baby poisons. They get in the way. We'll talk about that some other time. But so with Kale, you're going to need accuracy. Now, to go through campaign in the beginning, don't worry about accuracy at all. When you start looking at building your clan boss, especially going into the 2nd level and beyond, yes, you're going to have to start really worrying about accuracy. When you start getting into the dragon dungeon where Kale excels, you're going to need to start looking at accuracy. So with that said, you have a champion, you've been going through the campaign, you've now hit 30. What do you do next? Well, hopefully you've been going through the campaign and leveling up food sources with that. We call food any champion that you aren't building. So, for example, you see the champions I am building. If I'm building a champion, I'll lock them. If I'm not building a champion, what I do, and they uncommon and common by default are unlocked, but I make sure they're unlocked. So, in the early game, I say don't use rares at all, but eventually you're going to know which rares you want to keep and which ones you don't. If I wanted to keep Doomstrider, I would lock her. Otherwise, I keep her unlocked, and that's how I know that I can use her for food. Food is simply champions that you're going to put into other champions in order to upgrade them. For example, if I was going to upgrade her, I can put him in there. And if I put 4 of them in there, then she can go to level 5, or she can go to 5-star level 1. And then you go through building her up again and experiencing her again. So when you're starting new and your champion's at level 30, you're going to want to have her, and then you're going to use 3 champions of that 3-star, and they're going to go fill these slots, and you're going to upgrade, and that's why we call it food. The reason why we call it food is because essentially they're the same as a chicken. And a chickens are resources you can get by finishing tournaments, events. You can get for free through advanced quests, through normal quests. And you can also buy them if you need to. And so that's how you level up the champions. So with all that in mind, you're now going to be able to level her up further and further. Where do you level her up? Well, you're going into the campaign. We talked about it in the last video. Your first 100 turns is right in here. So what I always tell people is go to the furthest stage that you fail, and then step back to the first stage that you know you can complete with 100%. And that's where you keep building up those extra foods. So, for example, I'm at Brutal here. So let's pretend I'm going through Nightmare. Actually, don't think I've gone through Nightmare. So if I come here and I fail, then I'm going to take 1 step back. I'm going to go here. And remember, you have to beat it with just your starter. I actually don't know if I can beat this with just my starter, but we'll find out. And I'm going to put 3 champions that I'm going to use to level into other champions. And I'm just going to run this as much as I can. I don't think I can do this one solo. We'll see. This is why you want lifesteal gear. We'll talk about that in a second, what type of gear to use. So we're going to go through this. You may also, if you're in a hurry, you may want to go to a level that you can complete quicker. Also, I would say 12-3 is the most efficient place to level up your champions. So you probably wouldn't go into Nightmare. I'm just using this as a kind of a visual representation of, say you're in hard mode, level 7-3 you failed, 7-2 you can complete 100%. You go into 7-2 and this is where you would do that. There are a few exceptions to that, and I'll talk about them as soon as we're done with this level. So as you can see, we can get through this. We're killing it, and we're gonna be the stun. Oh, the stun! I hate that guy. Yeah, kill him. He's not a good dude. And a dwarf. I don't know why there's suddenly dwarfs in Carrick's castle. I guess Plarium didn't decided not to keep with their own theme here. We can sell that. A 3-star helm is not what we want, but you see how we getting some experience. That's helping us level up. We're good. We move on. Now, let's go back to the map. There are certain places where you want to focus on. 12-3 is the one. When we say 12-3, we mean Brimstone Path, which is 12, and we mean 3. Why? Because shields sell for more than any other artifact dropped. So you always get shields here, so you'll always get more silver per run. And the silver per run is greater on stage 3 when you sell that shield than on 12-6. The small amount, the extra 1% XP you get, but you get considerably way more, like it's 15-20% less silver. So you always want to go to 12-3. Now you can, in Nightmare Farm, you can go to 12-6. 12-6 is a place, if you have one of the farmers that can complete it solo, it's a great place to create food if you need to get as much experience as possible, but it gives you less silver because you're only dropping, so it's 16 energy instead of 8. So it's basically you're running 2 runs into 1 is the best way to think of it, and you're getting more than double the experience, but you're getting double the base silver, but you're only getting 1 drop. And in that case, it's 1 boot versus if you ran 12-3 twice, you get 2 shields. So there's way more silver available on 12-3 than there is on 12-6 Nightmare, so just keep that in mind. And finally, something else to consider is mystery shards are only available up to Brutal. On Nightmare Campaign, you can't get mystery shards. And mystery shards are the lifeblood of food in this game, especially when you're free to play. That is where you get your food. You do not want to use too many of your epics, if any epics, for food. And there's a lot of rares you may not want to use for food as well. So the most efficient way is to get common and uncommon champions and level them up, which you get from the market and you get from mystery shards. Okay? So you get to the place where you're stuck. But let's say there's a few places where I want to mention that you should take a step back. For example, if you can only get to level 10 or 11, whatever the stage is, drop back to the Deadlands. Why? Because one of the best farmable champions is available. When I say farmable champion, you see miscellaneous drops, there's some champions available here. And War Maiden, as a rare, has a 3-turn cooldown on the big one. It's Ascended, the big version of decreased defense. This is a very strong skill, and because she has a chance to drop, if you're stuck, I would step back to, for example, stage 6 or stage 3 of here, whichever one's more efficient for you as far as how long it takes to farm it, and you can farm through and get the champions of her. Now, champions of themselves can be used as books. So if I get 5 War Maiden drops as I run through here for a day, I can actually have 1 War Maiden use the other 4 War Maidens as books, which helps increase her skills. So it's a very strong way to do it. And there's a couple stages where that's the case. One of them is the Deadlands. Another one is sort of, quote unquote, sort of, Palace of Arivia, because Eris is pretty strong as well. She has a skill right here that allows you to remove 1 random debuff from all allies, and when you book her up, it's a 100% chance. And 100% chance of placing that 30% increased speed. Helps you go faster. Faster is good in this game. Talk about that in a minute. So that's an area. Also, if you need speed gear, if you're not quite getting as fast as you want to be, you can actually come here, and it's only going to be common or uncommon, but a 5-star uncommon boot is still 40 speed when maxed to level 16, which is probably the main stat that you need the most when you're farming this. I don't farm any, I would never farm campaign gear except for when you're trying to get to a certain tune and you're in the early game and you can't beat dungeons to get that gear. So the Palace of Arivia and Vladimir Strait is your lifesteal. So those are the two places where gear-wise you may want to look at to help make your champion a little bit stronger through drops there. Like I said, a 5-star common piece is better than a 3-star rare piece that you got from an early Dragon Dungeon run. The next place, the next champion you want to talk, is it Felwyn? No, it's not Felwyn. It's Durham Forest. That's Spirit Host. In the previous video, there was a comment, very rightfully so. Spirit Host is a great champion to have because it gives you increased attack and it gives you a cleanse, so you can remove all debuffs from all allies and place to block debuffs on allies for 1 turn. It's a 5-turn cooldown, but you can farm her up to get her booked. It also gives you a 10% all battle speed aura, which is very strong. Now, if you, as the poster in the previous video said, if you use the code to get a free Deacon, then you may not need War Maiden. Though I will tell you, books for Deacon are harder to come by than just farming War Maiden to book her up. You may want to use both in the interim. You may not, but I will tell you that Deacon, even without books, pretty strong champion. So I absolutely agree that that is a champion you can go with. If you get that Deacon, he has a speed aura, so you don't need hers, but she's still useful because of that increased attack. So you'll have Deacon, he puts a decreased defense, and he's got some turn meter manipulation on him. He's got that aura. You have Spirit Host to give you the increased attack, which helps hit harder. So you're decreasing their defense, you're increasing your attack. It's going to make your starter champion or your Rhonda hit harder. Great. You can also get one more champion, and this is the best one, arguably, in that you're already going into 12-3, and you can get a Diabolus. And Diabolus has, when fully ascended, or when 3-star ascended, increases turn meter of all allies and decreases the turn meter of all enemies by 15% on a 4-turn cooldown, and also has her own increased speed. So very strong champion to bring along to help you get through content, right? Deacon, Diabolus, Spirit Host, your starter, or Rhonda is going to clear most of the content in the game. Very strong when you're starting to approach dungeons. Add a 5th champion in there, your starter champion. A War Maiden if you want to make sure that you can get that decreased defense up all the time until your Deacon's fully booked. Whatever makes sense. Maybe it's a champion that you've pulled from your initial shards. So very strong way. The only other one that I usually talk about is Valerie. Valerie has a great skill here, which increases the duration of all buffs by 1 turn and decreases the duration of all debuffs and allies by 1 turn. You could conceivably use the Deacon, which is a promo code to get a free Deacon. You could use your starter champion. You could use Spirit Host, Valerie. That's a great team that will get you through most content early in the game. So that's, except for Spider. Spider is the one you'll probably get to 11 and then you'll be stuck. But everything else, amazing. So that's a nice little place. So if you're ever stuck, for example, Carrot Castle's at the very beginning, but say you just went from hard to brutal, you're getting stuck on Sewers of Arnok, you can drop back to Carrot Castle, get a few Valeries while you're going. Durham Forest, say you get up to Felwyn's Gate, you can't get any further, drop back to Durham Forest, get some of those Spirit Hosts. Same with, Palace of Arabia. Eris is probably the least of that. She's very strong in specific comps, but as a whole, but you might want that speed gear. You might want the lifesteal gear from Vladimir Strait. The Deadlands, you can drop back, and then of course once you get to Brimstone, you'll be able to double dip because that's 12-3, the best place to farm. Plus you're getting the chance to get all those Diabolus. So now that you know where to build, how do we build out our actual champions? That's probably the final topic for this video. I don't want to put too much on you into one video. So you've got your places to farm. You've got your champion. You know how to use smaller champions that you're not going to build in, to use to, as we call, feed in. So we call them food into your main champion to get her to 4-star. And then when you level her up to 40, then to get her to 5-star. It's a long process. It's arduous, but it's how this game is built. Now, what about the rest? So how do we build this out? Well, you're going to get free lifesteal gear from just logging in the first 6 days. That's what you're going to use. Eventually, you're going to get to the point, and if you use that technique of Deacon, say you use Deacon, Elhain, Spirit Host, Dablist, and Valerie, you could probably go into the Dragon Dungeon, get those up to 50. Have her at your starter at 6-star. 60, you can get into the dragon, and you can get that lifesteal gear as well to help build out the champion. But what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look for a few different things. First of all, at some point you're going to want to try to crit cap your champion. Crit capping is very simple. It just means you're at 100% crit rate. Now you can cheat the system. If you don't have the gear to get to 85, or more importantly 85, because you get a base 15, all champions at 15% crit rate to start, or alternatively you can get to 100%, but it's sacrificing too much of another stat, or you can't get it with wearing lifesteal, then you can go to 85%, because there's an affinity triangle that you can use to your advantage. Here's what I mean. We'll go into Sewers of Arnok. Actually, we'll not go into Sewers of Arnok. We'll go into Brimstone Path to show you. When you go into an area that you'd farm, you see this little triangle here. It explains affinity. And as you can see, magic affinity is stronger than spirit. Spirit is stronger than force. Force is stronger than magic. Anytime you have what's called strong affinity, which you can see Elhain, she has strong affinity against all 4 of these champions as an example, you get an extra 15% chance to crit, which means if you have an 85% crit rate, you're gonna get 100%. This is something you can exploit to your advantage in dungeons while progressing, or if you have a champion that you're only ever going to use in that dungeon, and the level that you're going to farm, say level 20, level 25, hard 10 if you're in the end game, you can use, well actually hard 10's void, so too bad, but you can use that to your advantage as progressing. So for example, you get stuck on Dragon Dungeon, that's a magic affinity dungeon, then any of your force champions, you only need 85% to be crit capped in that dungeon at that level. The other thing to note is weak chance. A chance to weak hit, which I believe is 20% chance to weak hit, goes the opposite way. So spirit affinity against magic, magic against force, and force against spirit. So when you weak hit, you hit for less damage, and more importantly, you cannot crit. There are a few champions where that they have a special case that weak hitting does not do anything poor. The other thing that's even probably more important on weak hitting is you will not land any debuff on a weak hit. So, for example, War Maiden against Spirit Affinity, she cannot land the debuff if she the decreased defense if she weak hits on that champion. Something to keep in mind, because a lot of the times this isn't talked about. Void Affinity is neutral to all, so it has no strong, but it also has no weak. That's why it's in the center. That's also why those champions are some of the most sought after in the end game. Okay? So using that knowledge, you can then extrapolate that to dungeons. So let's go into a dungeon, beautiful dungeon. We'll go into, no, Spider's a different world. We'll go into Dragon. So for example, I'm stuck on 13. But what that does give me is a chance when I can get him leveled up and put some gear on him. I have an Aelthar here who's a strong affinity, which means I can get him to hit 100% crit 100% of the time with only 85% crit rate because of that strong affinity. So same with War Maiden. She only needs 85 to be able to hit. Now, I'm not building War Maiden for her damage. I'm building her for that debuff. But it is something you can absolutely use to your advantage in different areas of the game. Flip side, if you're using Deacon, you know that there's a chance that he could weak hit against this same dragon. And therefore, because he's Spirit Affinity, therefore he might not land his debuff. Another reason why you might want to have a War Maiden, even a level 50 War Maiden with Deacon, until you can get to those stages where it's more advantageous to you. So, I don't want to get too much into dungeons. We'll talk more about dungeons later, so we'll talk about where to farm. So, using that to your advantage, you can build out your champions, but the long and short of it is, at some point you want to make sure that your champion is always hitting at 100% crit rate, however you make that happen. Okay? After that, so a champion like this, there is a very convoluted, I think it works down to 30-1. Correct me if I'm wrong. Leave in the comments down below if you remember the exact ratio that people talk about attack or primary stat to crit damage. And that's where for every 30 attack points is worth 1 crit damage when you're trying to balance them out. There is a formula out there. I apologize for not knowing it for this video. So when you're building out a champion, you want to first get that crit cap, and then you just want to improve. In this case, she's an attack-based champion. So all I want to do is I want to increase her attack, I want to increase your crit damage for more damage. If you're Kale, for example, you're also going to look at this accuracy, and that's where I find you've got this early game advantage of Elhain, is that she doesn't need that debuff, but quickly Kale surpasses her, because when you get into those dragon runs, his poisons make it easier to kill the dragon, and then it kind of shifts back to Elhain in the mid game once you have other poisoners that can do that job for you, and you don't need those poisons. For example, you don't need Kale in the clan boss because I have a frozen banshee, for example, and I don't need it in dragon because I'm killing the dragon without Kale's poisons. Then it switches to Elhain because again you can build her to hit harder because you don't need the accuracy. It's just a back and forth game. I think they're fairly equal in abilities. For example, Aethel, she has a weaken on her A1. Weaken's one of the strongest debuffs against the clan boss, especially in those first 3 clan bosses. It's actually better than decreased defense. So that makes Aethel very strong early game, even mid game, against the clan boss where you get your best rewards. So there's the things to think about as well. Your starter, probably not randomly throwing that information into you, but it's good to know. You also want to make sure that you're increasing your HP because you do not want to die. Now, one of the things is you can actually play with who the enemy fights based on your HP. Spiderlings in the Spider Den are a perfect example. They'll hit weak affinity, but if there's a champion that's so much lower and it's neutral affinity or even strong affinity to the spiders, they'll still go after it if they think they can kill it easier. So you can use HP manipulation to that. But for now, just know that the more HP, the more survivable. That's going to be the better for you. Typically for champions like Elhain, we're probably looking for that 35,000 mark. Same with champions you put in the clan boss. 35,000 at 4,000 defense is kind of the nightmare ratio. I think it's 4,100 defense maybe. And that's the point at which HP becomes better than defense for mitigating damage. So if you can get 40k, 50k, that's great, but that's kind of the first threshold you want, is that 35,000 and 4,100 or 4,000, that sort of thing. The last place you want to talk about is speed. And not the last place, it's the last important place. And it can be the most important place. A lot of people tend to go for attack and crit damage to make their champions hit as hard as possible at the behest of speed. But speed's actually more important than both. Why? Quite simple. If you can hit twice before the enemy hits once, then you effectively make your attack 5,000. So I'm at 2,400. I could get, say I push this up to 3,400 and my speed was 140 and my crit damage was 120. Well, that's great, but I only get to hit once before the enemy gets to hit me and potentially kill me. So if I can hit twice to their once, then effectively what I've got is I've got 168 crit damage at 5,000, roughly, you know, as a comparison. So hitting twice is very strong, and the easiest way to know is that all these champions in campaign and dungeons, up until very certain dungeons, Doom Tower is an exception, as well as I think hard level, they've changed it. But if I'm going into, for example, the Dragon's Lair, I'm going into 13, the speed of the champions in this level are the base speed of those champions. So I think in Magic, Bombardier or whatever he is, Bombardier, which one is he? He's a rare. Crossbowman's for an example. Crossbowman is a champion you fight a lot in Dragon. His speed's 95, right? So that means if you can get your speed to 191, you're going to go twice for every time he gets to go. Now that includes turn meter boost can help with that. So Dabless, for example. Speed Aura, for example, Spirit Host 10%. That's all included in that. So all you want to do, your goal is to go 2-1. Now the easy way to say it's about 200. Because with 200, and if you have a speed boost, there's a few champions that are over 100. I think the biggest champion in the game is 115, so that would be 230 to go twice to them. But then you can take advantage of your auras and that sort of thing. But a good roundabout figure, 190, 200, you're going to get most champions be able to go 2-1. That means you're going to get 2 shots against them. So that is absolutely a priority you should be trying to get to in order to make your champion stronger, especially your starter. So now we're talking about your starter. You're talking about get that starter in lifesteal gear. You'll get it free at the beginning. Use that. At some point, you're going to transition to Dragon. You're going to get better 5-star gear. You see I've already got some here. Then you're going to want to exchange that gear to get your starter in lifesteal. Use broken sets or paired sets if you can. Broken set, again, is just when you've broken it, so you're not using a paired set to get the bonus. If you can get a paired set, it's great, but don't sacrifice individual stats on pieces to get that paired. It's only a 15% bonus for attack, for example. That's, in many cases, not as strong as the individual pieces you'll get that are stronger in and of themselves. When removing gear that's not good, for example, this, both of these ones are really bad. Destroy rather than remove. Save yourself some silver. When you're using gear that you may use on another champion, obviously remove it, don't destroy it. And finally, we'll talk about the last thing, and that is your masteries. Now, I said in the last video that you should buy your first set of masteries. What does that mean? I can go here, she has no masteries. I can choose this, and I can get all scrolls, and for 800 gems, I can unlock all her scrolls. On your starter champion, this is very strong. So I highly recommend doing it on your first. Maybe even if you have Deacon, I would probably do it on your first 2. If you're using Rhonda, you may want to use it on your first 3, but I think the first 2 especially, if you're going Deacon Rhonda or Deacon starter, or even Rhonda starter, you can buy it on your first 2 champions, get their masteries. These are going to offer you a ton of extra damage. I don't want to wade into the specifics of what you should use here, other than if you have a champion that needs to land debuffs, go down the support, especially pinpoint accuracy, charged focus, swarm smiter. You'll probably want either sniper, master hexer, in some cases both. If you're an offensive based champion, if your damage is your key, then you're probably going to go crit rate into crit damage, and then from there probably single out, and then down the left side to War Master. War Master is a huge amount of damage, especially against the clan boss where it's capped, whereas Giant Slayer is for multi-hitters like Rhonda that's got 3-4 hits. I think she's got 3 hits on her A1 and A2. This is a really good opportunity because Giant Slayer can proc each hit. War Master can only proc once per attack. So it's a little bit different, which will allow Giant Slayer to do more damage on average on the clan boss. Now keep in mind, this is something a lot of people forget. The damage of Giant Slayer and War Master are procced on the clan, or sorry, are capped on the clan boss. And they're capped at the same damage. So this does not count for other areas. So you see here, her bonus damage is only 7.5. The bonus damage is 10% here. On the clan boss, that's irrelevant. On every other area, if it's a maybe they've got a 3-hit A1 but only 2 other single hits, you may still want to go War Master if you're using it, for example, against Dragon, because you're going to hit for less on the Giant Slayer. So you have to hit more times on the Giant Slayer for that to make up the difference, and it's a 30% chance instead of a 60% chance. So it's less damage and lower chance to happen, whereas War Master is a 60% chance to happen, and it's 10% of the targets. You see here 4% of the target's max HP when hitting bosses, and it's 3% when hitting bosses. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. That's my apology. So, and it also, by the way, it can occur on each hit of a skill, but does not count as an extra hit. And then over here, you can see it once per skill and does not count as an extra hit. So that difference, you should keep that into mind, that Giant Slayer does hit slightly less, but you have a chance for it to land for each hit. So if it's, for example, a 4-hitter A1, it's not even close. That's an amazing thing. You can get that to hit up to 4 times. It's more than going to make up the difference between the War Master and the Giant Slayer. If it's a 2-hit A1 War Master, you got 2 chances for it to proc, and then that's going to do the full damage. It's just on average mathematically more worth it. So now I want to mention, why do we say buy your first set? Well, yeah, they're very strong, but why not just farm it? Well, the reality is 2 things. First of all, the Minotaur, where you get your scrolls, which is a dungeon, it's a lot harder to get through these levels and get to the most efficient level, which is level 15 of the Minotaur's Labyrinth. See, I haven't even gotten there yet. So you can see here I get 24 to 32, 11 to 16, or 6 to 12 of these scrolls. It'll only drop the lowest level scroll until you've gotten the max, then it goes to the next. Right? Look how much difference, 6 to 12, 2 to 4. So if I was to try to get those T5, T6, which is the 2 bottom levels, which require the red scrolls, on stage 12 or 11, it would take forever. But on stage 15, it's a lot more efficient. The average roundabout, and RNG does play in, 6 to 12, but on average it's about 650 gems worth of energy to run stage 15 for a champion set of scrolls, where it's 800 to just buy them outright. On top of that, you get silver from stage 15 Minotaur, and you get experience, so you can bring your champions in here before their max level, and you can also get the experience from the dungeon. So it's more efficient to run stage 15. But if you can't get to 15, buying the scrolls on your starter champion is what's going to help you get to stage 15. And if you do that with, for example, Deacon and Rhonda as your 2 starting champions that you're going to level to 6, the 2 of them combined can easily get through stage 15, which means then you can be more efficient jumping into 15 for the rest of your champions and every champion after that. A lot of the times we get lazy and just do the 800, but at that point, that tax for doing it instantly is about your personal time, not about the in-game efficiency. The in-game efficiency is stage 15. If you happen to be able to get to stage 15 before you've got some really good luck on drop gear, that sort of thing, you come into here and you can get to 15 and you can complete 15 100% without buying, then don't buy them. But for 99% of you, the way to get to stage 15 of the Minotaur is by having your first champion maxed out in their extra procs for War Master, that sort of thing, and all those extra stats you get from the Masteries. So that's just an easy way to make your champion stronger early on. And in the early game, you actually get a lot of gems very quickly, so it shouldn't be too hard for you to get there. Well, this has been a long video, so we're going to end it there, building your first champion. The next video, we're going to talk about, probably talk about dungeons. But let me know in the comments down below, what is the next thing you want to talk about? What would you like to hear next? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll do my best to get that for you. So, time for me to sign off. It's been a lot of information, but hopefully it's been helpful. So, one last thing to say and do, and that is be safe, be kind, and I'll see you in the next video.